Hey, what's up? John Sonmez from SimpleProgrammer.com. And I got a question for those of you that are interested in developing your social skills here. This is fairly unique. I've done some videos on topics like how to build your confidence. You can check out there. How to overcome social anxiety, which is like going up and talking to people and being okay in a social situation, which you can check out here. But what I'm going to talk about today is what to talk about, right? Because I think that's really what the person asking this question is asking. You've only said how to improve my social skills. I guess this is part of your social skills. And he says here, Mr. John, hey Mr. John, Mr. John. This is Josh, by the way. He says, so I do think that I'm self-confident about myself. I don't have trouble talking to people, but I got nothing to talk about, and then it becomes awkward and I leave. Smiley, tongue out. Like I can get in front of a group of girls and do stupid things and wouldn't be embarrassed, but I can't keep a conversation going. What do I talk about? Weather? Food? I don't know. I need your help. Smiley face. So I would question the self-confidence thing. If you're doing stupid things in front of girls, that's actually showing a lack of self-confidence. But we're not going to discuss that. So you might want to just evaluate that though, and think about like if you think you're self-confident about yourself and you're trying to do silly things to gain attention, might not be. You just might not. You just might have a high threshold for embarrassment. But we're talking about what to talk about, and I think this is so. I've heard some really good advice on this. So there's a couple of things here. First of all, I'll give you two kind of sources of some advice. So the first one is a book by Dale Carnegie that I recommend all the time, which is called How to Win Friends and Influence People. You can check that out here. If you haven't read that book and you're watching this channel, seriously, go get that book. Are you crazy? Like, how many times have I plugged this book? It's a really good book. One of the best books. I read this book twice a year minimum. And I always still learn something new from it. But one of the things he talks about is the best way to get someone interested in you is to be genuinely interested in them. And so if you get in a conversation and you don't know what to talk about, and you don't want to talk about food and the weather and politics, ask a person about themselves. The subject that all people love to talk about and that you could talk about forever. In fact, he has some stories in that book where he was called a great conversationalist by someone who just talked about themselves the whole time, and he just asked questions. And so start asking questions about a person, like pay attention to what they're saying and then ask deeper questions, right? Think about, you don't have to grill them like you're interviewing them, but if you give someone the opportunity to talk about themselves, they're going to do that in a normal social situation, right? In one where you're not in a social competition situation. So if you're just going and you're talking to someone and you just want to make small talk and make conversation and build friendships, just ask them questions about themselves, let them talk about themselves, be interested in them, genuinely interested in them, and there'll be plenty to talk about. You won't even have to talk, I promise you. Now, that's one strategy. It's not going to work in the situation where you have high pressure social situations like talking to girls, especially like a bar or club or something like that, or there's social competition, things like that. You're going to need to do the talking, because you go up to, let's just be honest here. You go up to a girl at a bar and you say hi, and she says hi, and you say, so what's your name? She says, get lost. My name is no, right? That's not going to work, right? Even if she tells you her name, and then you ask her, so many of you have probably been in this situation. You ask her like, oh, so where are you from? And she says, from here. And she turns away, right? It's just not going to happen. It's not the right environment. So there are situations where that approach isn't going to work. You're going to have to demonstrate your own value, right? And so in that case, what you need to do is you need to have a bunch of canned stories that you have. And there's a few sources of this that I thought were really good. I'm trying to think, there's someone I've mentioned before that I follow, because he's just a brilliant person, a really good blogger. His name is Tynan. You can check out his blog here. I think I've mentioned it a few times, but you can check out his stuff. And I think he wrote a book on, did he write I'm not sure if he wrote it in his book or if I picked this up from Neil Strauss's popular book, The Game. which you can check out here. Not a book that I necessarily highly recommend, but it's worth reading, especially if you're a single guy and you want to understand some of the dynamics of the game, which, it's worth knowing. You should at least know this information, whether you want to follow or not. But anyway, regardless, one of those two sources talked about this idea. In fact, Tynan talks about it a lot, I'm sure, because he's got a couple of books out there. I think I've recommended one of his books called Superhuman by Habit, but I think he has another book about social skills. I can't quite remember, or about building friendships and circle. I don't know. Look at the Superhuman by Habit book, and then you'll probably find a link to it on Amazon. But anyway, he talks about this idea, and a lot of people that are in that kind of circle talk about this idea of having canned stories. So this is just a good idea to have in general. Again, it doesn't have to be just in this situation of pickup or anything like that. It can be just in general. Like I said, is if you have some canned stories that are interesting, this is a good idea. So think about kind of interesting stories, things that have happened in your life. A good example of this is I have one that I use quite often. If you've seen the Draw My Life video that I did, at the end of it, I did this story about how I met Blink-182 and took them to the movies to see American Pie. That's a great story, right? I've got that story, and I can talk about flipping burgers with iced tea and all this stuff, and some of you are interested right now, and you're like, oh yeah, tell me that story. Well, I can tell you now, you can watch that video, but I've got a few of those, right? I've got a few different stories that I can just tell because I've told them so many times, and you'll even see when I do these videos that there's stories that come up that I've talked about multiple times. But have like 5, 10 of these stories, add more to these stories, and then you'll always have something to talk about. And and one thing to study also, I think Tynan's book talks about how to craft a good story and what to put into it. A lot of emotion, leaving out like so many details, having a hook, right? There's a lot of ways. Become a good storyteller, and you'll always have conversation, and that'll be valuable. And again, that's going to apply, this story thing is going to apply in that situation at the bar, right? Because you got to gain the attention. You got to prove that you're worth talking to, so you got to impress, right? In situations like that, being a good storyteller, being able to entertain people, being able to keep their attention is much more important, because they're not going to let you ask them questions because they don't care. To them, you're not valuable, right, in those social competition situations. So you can still apply the storytelling to regular social situations as well, because everyone likes a good story. You also have to know when people are bored with your story and to drop it and go into different conversation threads. So there's whole dynamics around this. But anyway, I think those two pieces will help you, at least put you on the path. Look for, like I said, read that book, How to Influence and Influence People. Definitely in non-confrontational, non-competitive social situations, that approach of asking people questions about themselves is always going to work. The story approach is something that you should have anyway, because it's just a good backup when you're on the spot, and that'll work in both situations, both in the high competition social ones and in a regular situation. So anyway, great question. If you like this video, if you'd like to get more videos like this, definitely click the subscribe button below if you haven't already. If you did already, you've heard me say it so many times, so just click the like button and skip. Anyway, I'll talk to you next time. Take care.